I escaped humanity's last shelter. But the surface was a nightmare more terrifying than death. I never should have opened that door. It was just sitting there, gleaming in the dim light of the bunker, promising freedom, but I should have known better. Life in the shelter was dull, predictable. I followed the rules. I went to work, came home, ate my bland meals, and watched the walls close in on me. Yet, my heart raced every time I thought about what lay beyond. Was it not worth the risk? The unknown called to me like a dark siren. As soon as I stepped outside, dread washed over me. My senses screamed in terror. The world was colder than I remembered. Shadows flickered under the sickly pale sky, skimming along the ground like whispers of dead dreams. The air tasted metallic, a bitter reminder of something I couldn't name. I wondered, what had I unleashed? It was not the beauty of nature I longed for but a haunting silence that wrapped around me, tightening its grip. I moved cautiously, my breath shallow. Each step echoed in the frost of the abandoned streets. It felt like a graveyard. Old buildings loomed, a jagged skyline of twisted steel and broken glass. I could almost hear their stories, the laughter and screams, all choked by time. I strained to catch any sound, anything that confirmed I was not alone. But then, a sound broke the silence. A crack. Like ice breaking underfoot. My heart raced. Was it the wind? Or something lurking in the shadows? I stopped. Straining to listen. The world seemed to hold its breath. Another crack. Closer this time. My stomach twisted. I peeked around the corner of a crumbling wall. Just ruins, or so I thought. Then a movement caught my eye, a flash of something or someone. A figure? Its shape twisted and melted into the darkness. My knees went weak. I stepped back, but something brushed my shoulder. I whirled around. Nothing. Just cold air. The shadows felt alive, inching closer, waiting for me to make a mistake. My skin prickled with fear. I stumbled back, clumsily hitting concrete and gravel. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It was overwhelming. I darted forward, every instinct screaming at me to run. Just then a shriek pierced the air. I whipped around. Was it human? Or something worse? I couldn't tell. My heart thundered as dread settled in my bones. I stumbled toward the gate. Freedom was just a few feet away, but as I reached out, the door slammed itself shut. My scream echoed, swallowed by the emptiness. I turned back to the shadows. The figure, now much closer, became faintly visible. A shape, a form. No longer just a trick of the light. Was it a reflection of my own horror or something far worse? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure lurked at the edge of my vision, a grotesque semblance of humanity that silenced my scream before it could even escape my throat. Its bones protruded at unnatural angles, a reminder that whatever stood before me was once human, twisted now into a grotesque mockery. A thin veil of shadows covered its skin, pulsating like a grotesque heartbeat, and its eyes, if they could even be called that, were hollow pits, drawing me in with a void that felt ancient and wicked. A low, guttural sound escaped from its throat, a sound that twisted my insides into knots. I took a step back, desperately grasping at the air like a drowning man grasping for salvation. The figure took a step forward, and all I could hear was the soft crunch of gravel beneath its feet. The space around me felt charged, alive with a darkness that tightened around my throat, constricting my breathing. I stumbled backward, desperate to put distance between myself and the thing that bore down on me. With my senses heightened by fear, the world spun in a dizzying blur of shadow and sound. The echoes of that wretched shriek clawed back into my mind, intertwining with the figure's movements, creating a symphony of terror that drowned out every rational thought. I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the cracked pavement as I sought refuge in the belly of the ghostly city. With each stride, the shadows seemed to reach for me, snatching at my clothes and pricking my skin with icy fingers. The empty buildings watched as I fled, their hollow windows like gaping maws, waiting to consume me. I tore down an alleyway, its walls so close they felt as though they were closing in. The oppressive silence pressed against me like a blanket, thick and stifling, punctuated only by the soft skittering of something small and unseen within the rubble. My heart raced in my chest, a frantic drum urging me to escape. I arrived at a space where the alley opened up into a courtyard, a forgotten place dotted with weeds and crumpled debris. Moonlight bathed the ground in an ethereal glow, revealing the grotesque remnants of old advertisements plastered against the walls, their colors faded and peeling like pictures of a dream long gone. As I inhaled, the metallic taste of the air mixed with an overwhelming stench, decay, festering in the corners of the night. I turned, determined to find a way out, only to discover the alley behind me was no longer just an entrance but a wall of darkness, solid and oppressive. I swallowed hard, desperation clawing at my throat. Then it happened. A soft whisper, barely distinguishable, floated through the air, curling like smoke around me. "Help!" it breathed, the voice pulsing with a familiar sorrow that squeezed my heart. I could almost remember it, a name I could grasp if only I reached out further. But as I stepped toward it, drawn against my better judgment, I heard the noise again, the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. I spun around to face the source of the noise, the figure re-emerging from the darkness of the alley. It was closer now, the contours of its body sharpened in the moonlight, revealing twisted limbs and a sickening, open mouth, a gaping maw that appeared ready to consume everything in its path, including me. Just as I turned to run again, the ground beneath me trembled. Not just the earth, but the very essence of reality seemed to shift, a low resonating hum vibrating within my bones. I lost my footing, falling hard against the ground. I looked up to find the figure looming over me, impossibly close, the darkness wrapping around it like a cloak of the damned. The breath caught in my throat as its face hovered above mine, the dissonance of distorted human features swirling in my vision. My instinct screamed for me to fight, to flee, but all I could do was stare into the abyss that pulled at my very soul. And then I heard it again, the whisper, now urgent, echoing louder, "Help me!" In that moment, the shimmering darkness behind the figure split apart, revealing writhing shadows that flowed like smoke, creeping, grasping, as if hungry for something more than just flesh. Before I could understand what was happening, the earth beneath me cracked, a jagged fissure splitting open and swallowing the light. I clawed at the ground, heart racing, but the pull was too strong. The darkness began consuming the space around me, drawing everything into its mouth, and just as I felt the abyss around me closing in, I jolted awake, but I wasn't in the courtyard anymore. The walls were lined with sterile white light, shadows lingering just out of reach, and on the edge of my mind was that whisper. Through the haze of confusion, I heard it again, distinct and desperate. "Help me!" Except now, it wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside me, the shadow that had invaded my very being. A sudden pain lanced through my chest, tearing a scream from my lips. That I had escaped the darkness outside, but something far worse had found me. What I had thought was survival had only led me deeper into the grip of the unspeakable, and I was not alone. Suddenly, I turned to see another figure, one I recognized all too well, its hollow gaze meeting mine with malevolent familiarity. In that moment, I understood just how far I had traversed into the nightmare. That I wanted to scream, but it was already too late. The figure in front of me stood still, its presence a blight against the cold sterility of the room. The faint light illuminated its features, distorted and stretched beyond comprehension, eyes wide and gazing into oblivion, a mirror of my own horror. The resemblance was uncanny, a warped reflection of the self I had fought to preserve, now tainted by the darkness that had seeped into my reality. "Help me!" it whispered again, a chant that echoed in the recesses of my mind. Chills cascaded down my spine, and I staggered back, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. The room shifted around me, causing the sterile light to flicker, revealing glimpses of a reality blending with my darkest fears. Walls closed in with the weight of despair, throbbing with life, no longer just walls, but sentient beings laden with the secrets of countless victims that I bolted past the figure, the me that should never have been, and crashed through the door, stumbling into an endless corridor. Each step reverberated like thunder against the tiles, the sound stretching into cacophony. I was running, but the corridor seemed to warp and pulse, as though it were alive and shifting beneath me, determined to trap me in its embrace. At the far end, I could see a faint shimmer of light, beckoning like a siren-esque call. Yet every step felt heavier, as though the very air thickened with the weight of my surroundings. Shadows skittered along the walls, whispering like hungry ghosts, clawing at my sanity. I pressed forward, desperate to escape the echoes of my torment. Suddenly, the walls trembled, and a series of grotesque faces appeared, pressing against the surface as if trying to break through. They twisted in agony, their mouths forming silent cries for mercy, eyes wide with a horror that made my blood run cold. I screamed, the sound lost within the sinister wailing that filled the corridor, vibrating through my bones. Then I remembered that whisper, not just a plea for help, but a warning. Each face bore resemblance to those I had left behind in the world above. They weren't just victims, they were ghosts of my past, their presence a relentless reminder of choices made and futures discarded. Before I could comprehend the full implications, the corridor split, creating two distinct paths. The one to the left emanated an eerie glow, while the right, darker, pulsed with an unsettling rhythm as if something beat within its depths. The soft, breathless murmur of my own name lured me to the left. Help me please, but my instincts screamed otherwise. Deep within the darkness of the right path lay the unknown, the embodiment of all fears I had encountered. I took a deep breath, heart hammering against my ribs, and stepped into the pulsating void. Instantly, the air shifted, and I was engulfed by a suffocating blackness that clung to my skin like a predatory beast. An electric hum surged through me, vibrating from the core of my being and urging me to flee. Panic wove itself into the fabric of my thoughts as the echoing whispers reached a fever pitch, drowning me in dread. That I stumbled forward, arms outstretched, trying to maintain some semblance of direction. Yet with every inch I took, the ground beneath me turned to a viscous substance, grasping at my feet, pulling me deeper into its hungry maw. I could sense the shadows closing in as if they were alive, fingertips of dread tracing my spine and swirling around my limbs, stifling any escape. Suddenly, a voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. You cannot run from yourself. It was a voice I recognized, my own, distorted and twisted like the grotesque visage from before. The ground quaked, and I fell to my knees, the shadows rising around me, celebrating their impending victory. You're mine, the voice hissed, reverberating through my mind like thunder. Desperation surged anew. I clawed at the ground and pushed myself up, adrenaline coursing through my veins, amplifying the beat of my heart against the oppressive atmosphere. I groped through the darkness, searching for something, anything solid to grasp. A glimmer caught my eye, a small flicker of light amid the consuming void. My body responded like a marionette, the instinct to survive overrode reason, propelling me towards it. Each desperate movement felt like traversing an eternity, shadows gnashing at me, whispering secrets of terror and despair. But just as my fingers brushed against that flicker, the ground shuddered one final time, and the voice became an anguished scream. No! You will never escape. Everything exploded into blinding brilliance, an intense light that consumed my vision and disoriented my senses. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light snuffed out, plunging me back into darkness. As the silence pressed down deeper and heavier than before, I realized something was different. The whispers had shifted, now filled with mockery, laughter intertwining with the haunting desperation. The echoes of not only my own pain but of countless others reverberated within me, and somewhere, within that echo, a recognition struck. As I strained to grasp it, the shadows melted away, revealing a mirror. But the figure that stared back was not just grotesque, it was me, twisted like the riddle of my existence. The reflection twisted its mouth into a cruel smile, and the room I stood in began to pulse with life again, the boundaries of reality warping. I was not alone in this moment of confrontation. No, something had awakened, a horror that thrived off my wrestle for survival. The voice echoed once more, filling every hollow space of the room. "Now it's your turn to help." Before I could comprehend the full ramifications of those ominous words, the reflection surged forward, bursting through the glass frame, and I was consumed by darkness once more. And this time I didn't know if I would wake again. The darkness wrapped around me like a shroud, thick and suffocating. I could feel the remnants of that twisted reflection lingering somewhere in my mind, a parasite burrowing deeper, feasting on my fear. As I struggled to breathe, an inexplicable sensation washed over me, the sensation of being watched, stalked by the very shadows I had tried to flee. Even in this all-consuming abyss, faint glimmers of memories pierced through like distant stars. Laughter, joy, love, emotions I thought had perished within this forsaken realm. But they were tainted now, twisted into something grotesque. Each memory bled into the darkness, filling the void with echoes of pain and loss. I realized then that the shadows were not merely a presence, they were shaped by my own despair, each one a fragment of my past, gathering in a malevolent congregation. Suddenly, a cacophony of whispers surged, rising to a fever pitch, coiling around my thoughts. Familiar voices babbled incoherently as they pressed against the boundaries of my sanity. "You should have stayed. You meant to leave us behind," they chorused, their tones dripping with venomous betrayal. "Help us." I stumbled back, my heart thudding erratically against my chest, crushed under the weight of those accusations. These were not random specters, they were the whispers of those I had abandoned, the faces now revealed behind the shadows, not victims but makers of their own suffering, suffering I had fled from, vowing never to return. As I lurched forward, my feet sank into a pool of something warm, viscous, and unmistakably foul. The grotesque fluid clung to me, whispering secrets of despair that clawed at my resolve. Each breath was a betrayal, drawing in the fetid air that charged with unseen energies. The walls around me began to pulse, a rhythmic beating mimicking my frantic heart. Then, beyond the pulse, I saw movement. A figure emerged from the darkness, a woman shrouded in shadow yet radiant with a sinister glow. Her face was hauntingly familiar, yet I couldn't place her. As she stepped closer, her features sharpened a gauntness that belied the warmth of her once familiar smile. "Why did you leave?" she asked, her voice like velvet, wrapped in sorrow and edged with venom. My stomach twisted, a familiar ache surging as I recognized her. Carol, a friend I had thought lost to time and memory. Yet her presence now felt like a knife, a reminder of the bond one had severed, and the horrors that had clutched her away from me. Torn between horror and compassion, I reached out. "I didn't know, I didn't mean to. She spat, her form flickering, contorting into shadows. "You left us to suffer, to drown in darkness. And look where it's brought you." The laughter erupted again, a cacophony enveloping me as forms began to materialize around me, rising from the shadows like phantoms poised for torment. Their faces warped in agony, eyes glistening with rage and betrayal. "No. Please." I begged, but the shadows that had once called for help now sought retribution, striking out at me with hot hands that pinched, clawed, and pulled. My body turned rigid, locked in place as they surrounded me, their breath foul and hot against my skin. A strange resonance thrummed in the atmosphere, urging everyone closer. They whispered in unison, each syllable a driving point, daggering into my mind. "Help us or suffer with us," they taunted, the promise of oblivion singing sweetly to me. In the chaos, I felt the ground collapse beneath me, pulling me down into a chasm of swirling shadows. I fought against it, kicking and screaming, but the gravity was insatiable. As I plummeted further into the abyss, my voice faded into nothingness, lost in the overwhelming roars of the damned. I was sinking deeper, deeper beyond the piercing gleams of hope. Then the force shot me out of the darkness. The world above burst forth in blinding light. But instead of freedom, I found myself sprawled in a space that reeked of decay and despair. A cavern filled with remnants of despairing souls, broken remnants of humanity hanging like puppets. Their strings pulled by unseen puppeteers. Terrified, I rose to my feet. "What is this place?" I whispered, desolation heavy on every word. In the silence that followed, a single whisper curled into my ear, seeping like poison, "This is your last stop." Before I could react, shadows flared around me, icy fingers of night gripping my throat, drawing me closer, threatening to merge me forever into that accursed mass of lost souls. And just as I felt their agony intertwined with my own, a new figure stepped from the gloom, a grotesque shadow of myself, its mouth twisting into a smile filled with malice. "You should have listened," it hissed, and the world spun out of control around me. I realized with sickening horror that this shadow was not just a figment of my fevered mind, it was the culmination of everything I had ignored, every horror I had unleashed, and the darkness waiting to consume me whole. All I could hear was the mocking laughter, echoing endlessly until I gasped, "No." And just like that, the suffocating grip of shadows tightened, pulling me back into that infernal void, leaving me with one terrible realization: I was never meant to escape. Then, an anguished scream erupted within the abyss. But this time, the scream was mine. The scream that clawed its way from the depths of my being ricocheted off the walls of darkness, morphing into 1,000 echoing cries, rippling through the shadows like a wave of despair. This dark pit beneath the surface felt thicker than oblivion, swallowing me whole in a calamity of swirling forms, some friends, some foes, all forever entrapped in this nightmare of my own creation. As I descended deeper into the folds of despair, the temperature plummeted, a biting cold that seeped into my very bones. Each breath came with a wheeze, the air heavy with the stench of rot and ungrieved loss. The shadows whispered secrets I dare not comprehend, their sinister truths curling around my mind like barbed ivy, suffocating and tightening with every heartbeat. I thrashed against the grip of the darkness, clawing at the earth beneath me, raking my fingers against the rough surface, desperately trying to find solid ground. My mind was a tempest, battling the memories that assaulted me, a childhood friend, a mother's gentle smile, laughter turned to ash, echoing perilously. Perhaps this was the place where all the broken people went, the souls I had freed from my life but doomed to linger eternally within turmoil. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. A shift that resonated and vibrated against my skin, like 1,000 pairs of eyes turning towards me, silently scornful in their shared grief. I strained to listen, and the collective murmur transformed into articulate phrases, their tongues sharp with accusation. "You left us. You abandoned us. Now you will pay." In a violent tremor, the shadows surged, coalescing into a figure, a monstrous, twisted semblance of my own reflection. Its eyes burned with the remnants of my laughter and the anguish of my abandonment. "Do you feel their sorrow?" it hissed, its breath carrying the rancid scent of decay. "Please," I whimpered, hands raised defensively. I didn't know." "Oh, but you did," it sneered, contorting closer, and a pair of hands emerged from behind it, seizing my shoulders, anchoring me in place. The hands were familiar, tracing patterns of pain across my back. I looked over to see the ghostly visage of another long-lost friend drawn into this shared suffering, a faceless sorrow that wore the guise of all those I had lost. "Help us!" they screamed, faces twisting, the wounds of their past gaping wide, oozing memories like pus, memories of silenced cries, of joy turned to ash. "You can still save us." "Save you?" My voice cracked, the weight of their title dragging against my resolve. But I panic surged as they began to close in, the edges of my consciousness splintering as darkness clawed at my mind, each fragment of memory colliding, igniting like wildfire. I recoiled, stumbling backward, only to meet the unrelenting expanse of shadow behind me, and then I saw it, a glimmer within the blackness, a shape unfurling like a fresh wound, pulsing with an iridescent glow that seemed to call out to me, beckoning with promises of freedom or perhaps, eternal torment. The shadows around me pulsated with life, reacting to this disturbance, writhing in agitation, insisting that I turn away, pull back, escape. Don't go toward it," they shrieked in unison, the once somber tones now laced with palpable terror. "You mustn't." It was too late. I stumbled forward, drawn in by the lure of that pale light, and in an instant, I was engulfed, swallowed by the luminescence. A blinding surge of energy coursed through my body, a transcendent rush, but in that euphoric moment of transgression, I felt them, anchoring me back. The shadows latched tighter, like iron shackles locking me in a desperate embrace. Flee or become one of us. Their agonized shouts rang in my ears, yet the brilliance pulled me deeper, holding within it an alluring promise. Visions flashed, shadows of the life I'd forsaken, fleeting moments where I had turned away and the darkness took hold. Amidst that chaos, the reality of my choices crystallized. There was a spectrum within the light enticing me to abandon the darkness, yet I sensed the shadows attempting to anchor me into an irrevocable fate. The choice felt like a knife throbbing against my consciousness: embrace the dark fragments of my past or reach for that tantalizing light which seemed to warp in and out of my grasp like a fickle memory, a memory I'd long yearned to reclaim. With every precaution taken, I inhaled deeply to steady my racing heart. The shadow that resembled me moved closer, palms cupped, whispering, "What will it be?" But before I could answer, a monumental crack echoed through the chasm, splitting the darkness as the luminous orb ruptured and shot blinding rays that stabbed through the gloom. Then, the ground beneath shattered, breaking apart like glass, as I was thrust upward in a chaotic explosion. Searing pain washed over me, tearing through dimensions I never fathomed existing. The last thing I glimpsed before consciousness splintered away was the shadow's grin, a haunting promise of the truth that awaited, a truth I dreaded to confront. "Welcome back," it mockingly called as I spiraled into an unmoored existence. And then, as darkness won once more, I heard a voice not my own but familiar, echoing through the abyss. "You can't escape, not yet." The darkness bled into consciousness like a slow morning mist, curling around me with grotesque familiarity. I gasped as fragmented images clawed at my mind, a reality I had briefly escaped but never truly left behind. I pushed myself upright, the air thick as syrup, binding me to the ground beneath. Panic surged as I frantically scanned my surroundings, desperate to decipher where I had landed, this time that I was no longer engulfed in the shadows of my past, but I was far from free. The environment felt wrong, alien. I was sprawled amidst twisted wreckage, remnants of once vibrant colors dulled by decay. The sky above was a bruised canvas, with swirling clouds that churned like an angry sea, threatening to spill their wrath upon me at any moment. The scent of decay hung pungent in the air, mingling with something metallic, as if the earth itself bled for the sins that had seeped into its very core. Panic turned to dread as I turned my head and saw them, bodies strewn about, lifeless forms lying in grotesque postures, some entangled with one another, their faces frozen in rapture or terror. I staggered to my feet, my heart lurching as recognition gnawed at my stomach. Friends, acquaintances, all those I had abandoned, now stitched into this infernal tapestry of despair. They lay there, not merely as bodies but whispers of my past, echoes of laughter that had turned to screams. Their eyes were hollow, reflecting the malaise lurking within the space around me. "You can't escape, not yet." The voice slithered into my mind like an insidious serpent, curling around my resolve. Was it my own voice? Or the shadows that had taunted me moments earlier? I took a hesitant step, the crunch of crushed glass underfoot breaking the reverie of silence, only to have a wave of icy wind whip through the air. It carried with it a chorus of muffled cries, none clearly distinct, all resonating with the same desolation. I stumbled backward as one particularly profound wail cut through the air, twisting my insides with a fleeting sensation of familiarity. Turning toward the source, I spotted a flicker of movement within the depths of the wreckage. It was an impossibility, a figure, a silhouette caught in the periphery, beckoning with frantic gestures. Was it a person, or was it another figment of the relentless darkness? "Help!" it called, a muffled plea that felt both sparse and suffocating in its urgency. Driven by an instinct deeper than fear, I approached, each step a creeping dread that tangled with an undeniable curiosity. I reached the hollow of twisted metal and debris, and there it was, a familiar face, partially obscured by a veil of grime and the remnants of the past. "Is that you?" I gasped, recognition washing over me like acid rain. It was someone I thought I had lost forever, yet there they were, alive yet so deeply marred by the torment of this place. The figure's eyes, wild and desperate, locked onto mine, urging me nearer. "Get me out of here. They're coming." The edge of madness bathed their words, spilling over with urgency. I reached out a trembling hand to grasp theirs, and in that split second of contact, a jolt of ice surged through my veins, memories intertwining with the grotesque reality that surrounded us. Horrified, I pulled back, recoiling as I caught glimpses of my friend's thoughts, spun from shadows of their despair, a child's laughter twisted into anguished cries, the echoes of a family torn apart by grief, flashes of lives snuffed out in an unrelenting surge of darkness. "It's not safe," I stammered, a different kind of panic igniting in my chest. Had their spirit already claimed pieces of me, forcing me to join in their ongoing torment? "How do we? It's already too late." They screamed, the sound penetrating the suffocating atmosphere, while the twisted forms around us stirred awake, the eerie chorus of whispers transforming into a nightmarish chant echoing through the skeletal remains of our reality. The figures stood now lifeless forms reanimated, eyes sunken yet glowing with an unfathomable hunger. They pointed and hissed, shadows clawing at my friend. With every moment lingering, the world felt poised on the edge of madness. "Run!" I shouted, grasping my friend's hand, but as we turned to flee, the ground heaved beneath us, rippling like the surface of a pond disturbed by a pebble's plunge. Something stirred from below, the true horror of the depths awakening. What emerged next was neither monster nor man, but a writhing mass, slithering upwards with tendrils that grasped at the shadows, pulling them into its depths. It was hungry for souls almost forgotten, longing to draw others into its frantic embrace. The cries grew frantic, melding into the cacophony of despair as figures struggled against the malevolent entity. My friend's eyes bore witness to something far worse than I could imagine, and just as they opened their mouth to scream again, the thing lunged, snatching them away with a burst of jagged light, severing the bond we had just reclaimed. "No!" I shrieked, reaching out, but the shadows erupted around me, screaming and begging and ordering me to utter an incantation I could not comprehend. Shadows, figures from my past, surged forward, clawing at me with bleeding fingers, whispering warnings, and choking on their own agony. I staggered backward, falling onto the ground, my heart racing with the weight of their despair as something terrible shifted again in the shrouded skies above, darkness roiling like a storm, the air electric with a sense of impending doom that made my skin crawl. Then I heard it, laughter echoing beneath the chaos, a chilling melody slicing through the horror. Somewhere in the distance, a familiar voice flitted through the shadows. It seemed to float above the cacophony, overriding the pleas and accusations of the damned. "Welcome back," it teased, drawing nearer. And just like that, I knew the depths from which I had escaped would cease to be my refuge. All around me, shadows twitched toward the presence lurking in the dimmest corners, poised to pounce. I had not only returned to face my own demons but met with something far more horrifying. As the laughter intensified, I turned, just to see a monstrous silhouette breaking through the haze, eyes gleaming like fire in darkness, expanding, growing ever closer while the rest of humanity's last shelter crumbled to ash. In that moment, I felt the cold grip of terror envelop me once more as I realized, I had escaped only to plunge deeper into a nightmare that promised no salvation, no end. The laughter exploded into a deafening crescendo just as the ground beneath me shattered once more, dragging me down into the maw of darkness. Then everything went black, leaving behind the echoes still thrumming in the void. "You're not free yet," the voice whispered, now painfully close, the last thing I heard before surrendering to the consuming abyss. The silence that followed was suffocating, a thick blanket wrapping me in its icy grip. My senses dulled, the chill of the darkness seeped deeper into my bones, feeling less like an end and more like the harbinger of something worse. I floated in an inky void, unanchored and disoriented, until a flicker of heat pricked at my consciousness. The warmth was both inviting and terrifying, a tiny ember in a boundless night. Gradually, I became aware of a soft dragging sound, like fabric scraping against stone. Panic clawed at my throat as realization set in. I wasn't alone. I strained to blink my eyes open, and illumination flickered to life around me, barely penetrating the oppressive black. Faint shadows danced just beyond my peripheral, teasing my vision and beckoning me to look closer. To solve the riddle of this forsaken space, voices chimed in, indistinct yet melodic, a cacophony of desperate whispers cascading around me, lifting the fear that had encased me and twisting it into something more sinister. Join us, they coaxed, dripping with honeyed malice and inviting familiarity. My heart raced as memories swam in and out of focus, faces, places, all mockingly reminding me of what lay behind. With my breath hitching, I pushed upward, hand pressed against a surface that felt unnaturally smooth, like glass contoured to my touch. I clawed at it, and as I did, the shadows shifted closer, forms once familiar now grotesquely adorned, contorted and twisted from the struggles of a lingering existence. Their mouths opened wide, but it's the voices that cut through, laced with desperation and fury. We told you not to come back. I recoiled, memories flooding back, reliving those shattered moments that led me here, haunted by the unmistakable laughter still ringing in the depths of my mind. I staggered back as more shapes appeared, trapped souls weaving in and out of visibility, their emotions gnawing at the edges of my sanity. Their eyes glistened with the same hunger I'd seen in the ones who had first reached for me, but here was a raw, primal terror encased in endless despair. Suddenly, I was yanked from my reverie as a screeching figure lunged from the shadows, clawed hands grasping for me. I stumbled back, hitting the glassy surface behind me harder than I anticipated, sending a crack spiderwebbing across the wall. Help! I screamed as the monstrous form lunged again, its silhouette elongating grotesquely, teeth bared, a smile wider than any smile should ever be. The glass wavered beneath my touch, vibrating, the crack expanding as a tremor surged through its foundation. The frantic whispering escalated, a haunting mantra fueling my fear and driving me to pry myself free of this prison. Help us! They cried, voices harmonizing with my own despair, until I felt their collective anguish lifting me into action. Let me out! I roared, feeling strength surge through my fragile form. And then, shattering through the chaos, a singular voice rose above the din, a sharp clarity that drew my focus. You must not look at it. I turned, instinct driving me to obey, but the urge to glance at the shifting darkness beneath the glass tempted me terribly. It is the source, the voice urged again, the tone sealing my resolve. It will swallow your memories. You must break free of their grasp. The words sunk into my consciousness, igniting a fire that consumed my doubt. I pounded against the crack, breath haggard, heart pounding. This prison of shadows would not contain me. The walls trembled, and as they began to vibrate violently, I pressed with newfound force. I will not be a part of this. I bellowed, more forceful than ever, my spirit united with countless cries of resistance. With a final surge, the glass splintered, shattering outward as the searing light of the reality beyond burst through, blinding in its purity. I was hurled back into the chaos of the previous nightmare, but there was no time to contemplate my surroundings. I landed hard, gasping under an expansive sky suffused with unnatural hues, fiery reds and sickly greens swirling ominously. Dark clouds drew close, swirling as if animated by something sinister, their movements calculated and deliberate. The ground beneath me pulsed with living fury, dark tendrils emerging from beneath the surface, coiling and writhing, and those voices, they returned, but twisted now, echoing through the air, filling me with dread. You escaped, but at a cost. They will find you. Suddenly, from the depths of a chasm I had not seen, something surged upward, a figure draped in shadow, rising with arms outstretched as if summoning the very darkness itself. Recognition tugged at the edge of my sanity, a horror I had not wanted to acknowledge taking form before me, a reflection of every fear I had ignored, the embodiment of every moment I thought I had overcome. You're back with us now, it dripped, the voice twisted and layered, echoing my friend's laughter. Welcome home. As it lunged, darkness stretched out to seize me, tendrils wrapping around my limbs, pulling me backward toward a void deeper than death. The edges of reality warped and flickered, revealing glimmers of a brighter world that felt ever so far away. Just as despair began to close in around me, a familiar scream erupted from the chasm, a haunting melody entwining with its terrifying laughter. No! I screamed, straining against the darkness, and then the world vanished, leaving nothing but an echo of that laughter resonating through the air, a promise of what awaited me and the realization that there was no escape left, only horror in its seemingly endless array. Somewhere in the oppressive expanse, a dark figure beckoned, and I faltered, frozen in the face of the nightmare that was waiting just for me. "You walk a fine line between salvation and annihilation," it whispered, the last thing I heard before the abyss closed in and everything turned to black once more. I awoke in a disorienting fog, confusion enveloping me like a heavy shroud. The shrill laughter still echoed in my mind, along with a lingering sensation of icy fingers tracing my spine, but reality began to solidify around me. I was lying on damp earth, the once blinding colors of the sky now muted to a sickly gray. All around, the air was thick with a metallic scent, mingled with something rancid that clung to my throat, making it hard to breathe. Panic surged anew as I pushed myself up, scanning the horizon, an endless expanse of murky land before me, dotted with grotesque statues of twisted figures, their faces contorted in eternal despair. I pressed my hands into the soil, which pulsed under my touch, as if alive. The stench grew stronger, grounding me in this nightmarish reality and forcing me to acknowledge that perhaps escaping my previous torment had led me to an even darker realm. A low rumble vibrated through the ground, and I turned to see shadows shifting among the sculptures. They felt alive, an audience watching my every move. "You're not alone," they whispered in unison, tongues flicking like serpent tails. "You brought them, didn't you?" My breath hitched at the realization. It was true, this new terrain was a reflection of my sins and fears of those who had perished at the hands of my decisions. Though they were now concealed in darkened forms, I sensed their presence, tangible like a noxious fog swirling around my feet. "Leave!" I shouted towards the chilling figures, my voice cracking, desperation fueling my command. But they responded only with laughter, dissonant and taunting, filling the air with the acrid smoke of their malice. That I stumbled backward, feeling the weight of dread press heavily on my chest. My heart raced as I noticed a flicker of movement behind one of the statues, a figure cloaked in shadows shuffling forward, dragging a heavy chain that sang mournfully with each step. This new specter was nothing familiar but bore an unmistakable aura of perpetual anguish. "Help us," it rasped, voice frayed as if torn from the very fabric of suffering. It raised its hands, contorted and splintered, muffled cries escaping its cracked lips. "You could save us if you only knew how." I could feel an inexplicable attachment drawing me closer, a damnable curiosity intertwined with empathy, but the words of the nameless horror from before echoed in my mind, "They will find you." I hesitated, sensing the gathering tendrils of darkness shifting once more around me. "Turn back," a voice warned, brittle yet commanding, approaching from the east. I looked to see a shadowy mass forming twisting human shapes, their mouths stitched closed in a permanent scream, advancing slowly, deliberate. The leader, a figure with a burnt visage, reached forth. "You cannot change what you have done. Your presence here shall only intensify the suffering, yours and theirs." A sickening realization caught in my throat as the figures pulled closer, their ethereal chains binding them to the earth. My hands trembled as fresh dread coursed through me. "No. I didn't mean to," I faltered. But my protests fell on deaf ears. The shadows surged forward, a tidal wave of despair intent on reclaiming me. The shadows drew nearer, and I turned on my heels, sprinting through the fog, desperately dodging tendrils that lashed out like angry serpents. With every breath, I summoned a flicker of courage, letting it illuminate my path as I crushed through the muck, and plunged deeper into this hellish landscape. Beside me, the figures groaned their futile desires. A muffled call turned imperative. "The heart of the realm, find it. You must free us," they cried. I felt their pain, their longing for escape clawing at my core. Pushing onward, an unnatural light flickered in the distance. My pulse quickened with a lava-hot mix of hope and horror. The light pulsed rhythmically, promising sanctuary yet tainted with an underlying warning. When I reached its source, however, the sight twisted my stomach into knots. It was a colossal heart, pulsating with dark energy, infused with shadows. Spiraling endlessly. Wisps of anguished souls exhaled through a shattered membrane, their cries merging into an unholy symphony that drove blades of despair into my spirit. "Touch it," the shadows whispered, flocking closer. "It will grant you power, but at a price." As the heart's rhythm matched my own racing pulse, I froze in place, grappling with the overwhelming urge to listen. "Join us, be one with the eternal," they beckoned, the darkness enrapturing my thoughts and heightening my darkest instincts. Just as I reached out, the ground beneath me gave way, a surge of shadows erupting around my legs, dragging me downward into the abyss. As I fought against the pull, a shriek pierced through the air, my own voice, blending into the shrill chorus of the lost souls. With desperation fueling my efforts, I clawed at the surface, visions flashing in front of me, familiar faces consuming the darkness, resonating through the void. "No!" I screamed, but the shadows thrived on my despair, eagerly attempting to swallow me whole, and in that moment, I felt the darkness shatter, revealing a glimpse of light, a knife edge of salvation beckoning me to leap towards it. Just as I mustered the strength to free myself, the darkness pulled tighter, curling around my throat, whispering devouring promises. In that final instant, a vision struck Sky's face, eyes wide and wet with fear, the last time I saw her, as she stared in disbelief, her last word forming like a spell on her lips, "Why?" And as the void roared with fury, the darkness enveloped me completely, leaving only that haunting question lingering, like a ghost tethered to my soul, a potent reminder that true escape might be a nightmare beyond imagination, and that a reckoning for my past choices was yet to come. When the pull of the shadows finally ceased, I found myself sprawling on the cold, uneven ground once more. The air was thick with anguish, and my senses wrapped themselves tightly around me. I tasted blood on my lips, my heart thundered in my chest, and the whispering darkness seemed to retreat, only to swell ominously just beyond the reach of my failing vision. Disoriented but instinctively aware that my time for reflection was over, I scrambled to my feet. The ground beneath me trembled as though it had absorbed the chaos, and I could almost feel it sigh, a long, dreadful exhalation that chilled my bones. Shapes moved at the periphery of my sight, shadowy forms darting just out of focus, hinting at greater horrors lurking in the distance. "Come back!" an echoing voice lured from the depths of shadows, teasing my name like a siren's call. "You left them, you left us." It twisted and curled around my thoughts, erasing the resolve I had attempted to muster. Those words nourished the resentment growing within me, flooding my mind with images of betrayal and forgotten faces. I stumbled forward, seeking salvation from the remnants of my sanity. Each step felt heavier than the last, the swampy soil seeming to hang on to my feet, dragging me into its suffocating embrace. I fought against the cloying grasp, but every breath became a tempest as the air thickened into an inky fog. That incessant laugh weaved through it all, orchestrating an unsettling melody, luring me deeper into the heart of this malevolent paradise. Shaking my head, I pressed onward until a sharp pang drew my attention to my side. I jerked sharply, my gaze falling to see a twisted vine, intertwined with thorns and darkened flowers, gnawing at my flesh. I felt the length of it crawling up my arm, threading like a living entity, hungry to merge with my own essence. I yanked it away and stumbled backward, the blood rolling thick and warm down my wrist. As I steadied myself against a statue that loomed threateningly beside me, something distorted, half human and half monster, its face a twisted mask of endless despair. I noticed the figures I thought had fled found their way back, surrounding me in an unfathomable circle. Their mouths were still sewn shut, but their eyes glistened with unshed tears, bearing witness to their suffering, inviting me to understand what lay beneath those stitches. "Free us," they implored silently, their wicked, stitched mouths framing the word in each penetrating gaze. A flood of guilt crashed over me, sharp and bitter, forcing the memories of my failures to the surface. I could feel the weight of Sky's final glance crushing down on me, the raw emotional pain pouring back into my heart. Through the writhing figures, a shiver crept up my spine as the shadows darkened, pressing tighter against my consciousness. The unyielding laughter merged with the urgent whispers, creating a cacophony that enveloped me like a stranglehold. I felt a sickening pull at my core, a deeper despair resonating in the soil beneath me, promising to consume me if I dared to hesitate again. But just as terror threatened to swallow me whole once more, a blinding light erupted from the heart that had just moments prior captivated me. It pulsed with an energy older than time, each beat seeming to echo the anguish of all the souls it had devoured. The melancholic beauty of it was irresistible, and I found myself drawn towards it, the shadows recoiling as if burned that I moved instinctively, cold tendrils of fear igniting behind me as despair surged anew. Drawn by an inexplicable pull, I approached the heart. The closer I got, the clearer the vision became. I could see the faces trapped within, trapped in an eternal cycle of torment. They wept silently, eyes wide with helplessness, their mouths still bound. "Release us," the voices begged. Or be consumed with a fractured resolve, I reached out toward the pulsating luminosity, every inch forward feeling like an oscillation between hope and horror. Just as I stretched my fingers against the surface of the pulsating heart, a deafening shriek rose from the darkness, tearing through my mind. "Dare you challenge the abyss?" A roar of teeth and shadows erupted from behind me, and I spun around, facing an immense black silhouette that dripped darkness like venom. It towered over the figures, eclipsing them momentarily as it stepped forward, revealing an abominable visage, distorted and twisted, its form ever shifting like an ounce of smoke releasing into the night. "Did you think to save them?" It hissed, voice a chilling reverberation that echoed endlessly through the air. "Or did you merely seek to feed your own insatiable hunger?" In that moment of realization, I understood the truth about the heart. Each soul pinned within it did not crave liberation but rather drew their power from my suffering. And on that horrid realization hung an ultimatum. In my desperation, I had opened a door wide, but the shadows were waiting to cross the threshold. "Choose," the creature growled, the darkness swirling around it like a tempest. "You can save them, or you can save yourself. But the choice comes at a cost." The question hung like a sword above my head. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, but those haunting faces within the heart dug into my conscience, urging me to fight. As the shadows clawed at my resolve, darkness whispered sweet promises of life, while the luminescence of hope flickered ominously before me, and just as my choice crystallized within my mind, the ground below erupted. I felt myself plummet once more into the abyss of uncertainty, and the last echo of an anguished scream collapsed around me, drowning out my resolve. I woke with a start, the ground beneath me solid yet strange. The air was thick and charged, a weight pressing down on my shoulders. I blinked, scanning my surroundings, and what I saw made my blood freeze. I stood in an impossibly vast expanse of twisted trees, their gnarled branches reaching upward like skeletal hands vying for a sky that remained perpetually dark. The chill sunk into my bones, and with each breath, dread curled its fingers tighter around my heart. This was not the freedom I stalked when I opened that accursed door. The ground trembled, and shadows flickered in the periphery of my vision, shapes dragging themselves towards me through the thick fog, each one cloaked in layers of darkness that swirled like smoke. I could hear their whispers, soft, mournful echoes inundated with regret and anger. You left us," they implored, each word slicing through the silence like the sharpest dagger. Instinctively, I took a step back, my breath snagging in my throat. But the ground quivered, vibrating underfoot, as if the very earth was alive with despair, forcing me to confront my choices. "No," I whispered, desperation clawing to the surface. "I can't be here." As I turned to flee, the shadows lunged forward, coiling around me, sharp and suffocating. I gasped, struggling against their grip, only to find myself dragged downward, pulled into a chasm of oblivion that felt all too familiar. Panic surged as ethereal forms emerged within the murky depths, disjointed faces twisted in agony. The once familiar figures, friends, lost loves, those I had abandoned. "Help us!" they cried, their mouths sewn shut, but their eyes wide and pleading, and then, from the depths of that wretched darkness, a figure caught my attention. At first, I thought it to be another tortured soul, but the more I looked, the more the horror morphed into recognition. It was my own reflection, distorted but unmistakably me. The twisted grin carved into its features sent chills spiraling through me. "You thought you could escape, but you've only returned to yourself," it snarled, its voice echoing with enticing malevolence. "Stop. You're not real," I cried, fighting against the pull of inevitability, but the echo of my own laughter twisted into a cry that rang through the abyss. "You have no idea what awaits you," it taunted, the shadows rising around it, almost worshipping the grotesque reflection of my past choices. "But you will soon understand. You cannot abandon what is yours." In horror, I slowly began to perceive the truth that I had not merely escaped into a darker realm but rather into a facet of myself I had long tried to repress, the very embodiment of my failures and fears manifested in the abyss. I stumbled back, pushing against the cold ground but realizing there was nothing for me to grab onto, nothing to anchor my true self. Suddenly, I was thrown back into another vision, where the heart pulsed voraciously before me, writhing in pain. But this time, the figures drawn to its aurous glow were not just tortured souls of my past but reflections of what I had become, minds consumed, facades lost, all connected by the very choices I had made. It housed the quagmire of my choices, the essence of my being warped and twisted within the light. "Your heart is their prison," the doppelganger rasped, closing in on me. "You are the key, but do you possess the strength to unlock it, or will you choose to surrender to the shadows and become one with us?" "No!" I screamed, but the echo of that word disappeared into oblivion, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. The laughter continued, an unholy symphony urging me to relent to the gathering storm of shadows, a call to embrace despair instead of fighting against it. Yet, amid the din, there was a sudden crack, a fissure opened in the very fabric of the darkness, spilling forth a beam of light that struck me like a bolt of lightning. In that moment, I realized the truth: I was never alone. The souls entwined within the shadows were those of my past, but they were also part of me, reflections of moments I once cherished, choices I made to keep them at bay, every decision, every moment of weakness, every echoing laugh twisted in torment. But dread mingled with resolve, igniting a flame within me. They didn't just seek to pull me back, they desired to teach me, to urge me to act. "Help us find peace." The whispers crescendoed in unison, rising higher, merging into one desperate voice, slicing through my defenses. As I reached out toward the luminous heart, an excruciating pain surged through me, exploding in a zillion fragments. I felt the shadows shimmer, willingly drawn into that light, each gasp of despair a violent detonation that ripped through the darkness. "I remember," I screamed, heart pounding. "I will not turn away. I will not abandon you again." With that, I reached through the radiant core, feeling the warmth swell inside me, each pulse synchronizing with my heartbeat and igniting my resolve. Visions of lost lives and illuminated laughter rushed through like a vengeful tide, merging into something powerful, holistic, and painfully alive. The shadows lunged, succumbing to the brilliance unraveling around them, causing shrieks that crescendoed into a symphony of freedom. There was warmth, there was light, and above all, there was the promise of liberation. In a blinding instant, I transcended, plunging from the darkness into a rebirth that carried with it the anguish of the past, but now reinforced with love, hope, and the understanding that the only way to escape the cycle was to confront it, to embrace the darkness and coax it into the light. As the shadows evaporated, forcing my doppelganger to writhe and spin like starlit dust, I gasped for air, feeling something tremendously liberating sweep over me. I had turned the tide against not only my demons but those of every soul entwined within my existence. But as the light faded, darkness lingered at the edges, whispering a grim promise: this was merely the beginning. And then I heard it, a laughter, ricocheting off the walls of the infinite, winding through the residual shadows that still draped the corners of my mind. It echoed once, then twice, anchoring itself within the depths of my consciousness, forever reminding me of the darkness I had called forth and the eternal struggle that would forever thrive. "Welcome back," it cooed once more, leaving me to shiver as I realized the roots of my horror ran deeper still, entwining me into a dance with the very fabric of my being that could never truly be undone.